Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at 6:33 p.m. As a reminder, New York state law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Members of the public, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature in Zoom. If there is time following committee discussion, we will field questions from the public. Karen Moore will take minutes tonight. Thank you for volunteering to do this tonight, Karen. And just a reminder, you've received, I think, multiple emails now to sign up to take minutes via the Doodle link. If you can do that, it would be much appreciated. And Brendan, if you could just share the link in the chat for committee members, that would be great. We will now take attendance via roll call. Brendan, will you conduct the roll call?
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Jim Collins.
Present.
Okay, Biano can't make it tonight. Nadeem Kalani.
Present.
Eva Marie Lassiter. I know she's here, so
I have to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear
Yes.
you. Jason Littman.
Present.
Karen Moore.
Present.
Steve O.
Present.
Reshma Patel.
Present.
Hannah Singleman.
Present.
And Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Brendan. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will accept the meeting's agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the August 8th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the August 8th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. The chat function should be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. Or rather, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us of any technical difficulties you're having or state in writing information like an email address that has already been stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will identify you and you can unmute yourself so that you can speak. We are required by New York state law to have a transcript of this meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion. Committee members are required by the state open meetings law to have their Zoom cameras on and their first and last name displayed during tonight's entire meeting, from call to order to adjournment. If you must step away from your computer briefly, you are required to leave your camera on. So tonight's agenda, part one is the public hearing, and part two is our committee meeting, which will be discussing the FY 2024 budget request and district needs statement. We'll have the chair's report and any old or new business. The public hearing for the Community Board 6 budget needs statement and budget request for fiscal year 2024 is now open. If any members of the public want to speak on budget-related matters, please indicate that in the Q&A feature, and you will be granted the ability to speak on a first-come, first-served basis. You would have up to 3 minutes to speak. Brendan, if you could just, I don't see any hands. I also don't see any public members. So if you happen to see anybody, please let me know.
Okay, I do see one response in the Q&A feature from Ann Hirsch saying, did you receive my email regarding amending certain parts of the list of budget requests?
Yes, we did. And this is in regards to Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza fountains and repairs.
I do not see anything else. Okay, just a moment. And she also asked whether you received Steve Simon's update and correction. Just for the record, Steve Simon is Chief of Staff to the Manhattan Borough Commissioner at the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation.
So I haven't received, I got Ann's email. I haven't gotten any email from Steve Simon that I know of today, but based on our discussion from last week's Parks meeting, we are updating our budget request as per the discussion that we had, where we're going to separate out the request.
The office can make sure that that information is forwarded to you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Reshma, given that we're in the middle of a public hearing and it looks like Anne has some remarks that she would like to make, maybe we give her the floor in the context of this public hearing so that we're clear what her input is and we have it on the record.
Sure, that sounds good to me. So Anne, you have the floor. And Jesus or Brendan, if you could just allow her to speak as a panelist.
Brendan will do that.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Anne.
So subsequent to the email that I sent regarding the 2024 changes for the item that was originally referred to as fountains,
Yes.
there have been a lot of updates. There was a lot of discussion last week, and then Steve Simon made some comments, and I tried to integrate all that into what I sent you. Then Steve Simon updated that. So this is now the latest, and you were copied, I presume, in his email, so it should be with you, but this is really what should now be in the 2024 budget needs. And that is that he is going to include in the 2023 fiscal budget, the fountains, the electrical system, the second garden entrance, the uplighting of the sculpture platform, and I believe trees and tree grates. What that leaves then for 2024, still on the table, is basically the asphalt block replacement in certain sections of the plaza and the steel pipe fence to replace mesh temporary fencing that is in front of the seating wall between the fountains that protects the flower beds. And aside from trees and grates, which we've had some trees replaced, none of the grates replaced, that is what's on now, it seems to me, the needs list for 2024. And how does one just simplify that? And is that up to you to kind of summarize it? And because what was there on the record for 2023 was really quite ancient.
Yes, so we will, myself, along with Kevin O'Keefe, who's the Parks Committee Chair, who, and who this budget request goes under, as well as the office, will work on summarizing that for our budget.
Okay, great. So if there's any questions, I trust you'll call me or Steve or both of us. And that going forward, we will try to stay more cognizant of what's on these lists so that they're kept current. Should things change, do you change then the 2024 budget, or does that become it for the 2024 fiscal year?
So it becomes it for 2024 fiscal year, and then we start a new cycle for the 2025, and so it gets updated. So we'll be submitting something end of October of 2022 for 2024, and again, end of October in 2023, we'll be submitting for 2025. So
Right.
yeah.
Because just to wrap this up, our main concern is that council member powers and our borough president and perhaps the mayor's office are all very clear on what the funding is needed for. And we're not talking about some past project or our old history. So thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you for your follow-up in your email. And I just checked my email and I didn't get anything from Steve, but the office has it, so they'll forward it to me.
Okay,
And
perfect.
if changes do happen before we resubmit our district needs statement, we can always go through council member powers because they are, I mean, he as a council member is involved in the budgeting process, and perhaps, you know, if we have changes, he can kind of do something about that. So.
Yeah, and he is actually, it's very important that he be clear
Yes.
on the change, on Steve's approach to this, because Steve has changed it, and that needs to, and the council members seemed a bit foggy when we have asked him the status of this project. So thank you for your time.
So we will reach out to the Keith Powers' office as well, just to make sure that we're on the same page on this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Brendan, do you see anyone else on the public?
No, I do not.
Okay, and neither do I. And so I am now closing the public session.
On information, I see Larry Shire is on as a participant. I don't know if you wish to comment.
Oh, thank you.
If you look in
Jim.
the participant pool.
Larry, would you like to speak?
His hand was not raised.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So then the public hearing for the Community Board 6 district needs and budget requests for fiscal year 2024 is now closed. And we will begin our regular committee business. And I just like to remind everybody, if you have comments, please raise your hand. Brendan, can you share your table?
Just a moment.
A question.
Yes, Jim.
Do we, and I know traditionally we have not, but do we allow written comments from the public, from people who have not been able to attend the meeting on time? In other words, do they have like 30 days that we would traditionally have in a public hearing in order to submit written comments?
Anyone can submit a written comment at any time to any committee on the board, I think.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian, for that clarification. The CV6 budget request Airtable is shared here on the screen by Brendan, and would go one by one and to see if any committee members have comments on it. I have spoken to most of the committee chairs. There are some who I'm still waiting for final feedback from, so we may have still more changes. Parks Committee had a very detailed discussion last week, and a majority of our requests are for capital projects through Parks Committee. So a lot of this has just been updated very recently. And the first item, which is going to Ann's comment from the public meeting, which is the capital improvements for Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. And I don't know if we put the detail in yet or not, Brendan. I don't see
We haven't. These very,
Okay.
very new ones, we haven't. There was
Okay.
a lot of details.
Okay.
Sorting through all of them, and we're going to have to work with either you or the committee to come up with the official 800-character blurb.
Okay. And so I have been in touch with Kevin today after we've got the email, so he and I can work on that together.
Great.
So then if you can move on to the next item. I can't see it right now. Okay.
On information, is that
Yeah.
it's listed as one on the budget request on the file. Is that correct? It's not, is it? The number one priority is the additions to Dog Hammarskjöld Plaza?
No, that's
Improvements?
just, I mean.
That's just a placeholder. Okay,
it's a
I just wanted to
placeholder.
clarify it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next request is more affordable housing, which is, something that has been on here from the committee for, as you know, for a long time. And here's a description. I'm not going to take up time by reading it. If people need help, if they can't see it on the screen, please let us know. And if anyone has any changes, any objections, any reasons to change this or anything, let us know. If everyone is okay with this request, we will move on to the next one. I see your hand up.
Yeah.
Speak, yeah.
This has been a budget priority since I've been on the board, which is about 25 years now. And I raised this at land use. And our intern addressed this as well, and not in any detail, but basically he said, based on what he saw, that we weren't necessarily rent burdened in this neighborhood or in this community district. Yet we keep having this as our top priority. It's basically a Sisyphean task if we keep keeping it there. I mean, people are always going to come to New York. People are always going to want cheaper housing. And it just seems, like I say, a Sisyphean task. We can ask for it, we can build it even, and we'll still need more. So, or request more. So I've always, I understand the desire for affordable housing, but I think there are other priorities that should presume or should preclude this. And I disagree with my committee. I just want to state that for the record. The land use committee voted for it, but like I say, I disagree with that on the record.
Okay, thank you. I see Brian's hand and Karen's hand up. So Brian first and then Karen.
Hi, my rental lease for my last apartment was up on March 1st, 2020. So we were looking for new apartments in December and January. I could not find a one-bedroom in the southern half of this district for under $3,500 a month. Our minimum wage is $15 and the rent has only gone up since then. The mayor just raised regulated rents up by 5% per year and looks to continue that pace for his mayoralty. It is our moral duty to expand the housing in the city. It has been woefully underbuilt in the last 20 years, with the pace of housing starts and building permits being assigned far behind our actual job and population growth. In the last 10 years alone, we've only built 200,000 new units in the entire city of New York, while we've created 700,000 new jobs. We absolutely need to address this however possible. Should also remind the committee that it is not our place to discuss the appropriateness of budget items that are submitted by their home committees. Our only role in this process is to sequence them. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Brian, for the comment, and thank you for that reminder that we're really right now just talking about sequencing. I failed to mention that. Karen? Karen, you're muted.
I agree with Brian, but I also had a question for Jim, and
that, for all of those reasons that Brian, even though we know the situation is currently intractable, I don't think that means we let it go. So, Chris, Jim, you said you thought there were other things that were more important. Can you tell us what you think they are?
Well, there's
So that we
several.
might think about it next year?
So
Yeah,
Karen, I just wanted, Jim, before you speak though, Eva Marie had her hand up, so I'd like to let her, just to go in order. Eva Marie, if you can
Sorry.
speak, and Jim, we'll go back to you to answer the question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I just had a question in terms of the agency. It says that the agency will accommodate in part. Is there any way to get any more specific information from the agency in terms of what type of support we would get? Because to me, this description has gone on for so long, and it's so very vague. Even though we keep the top of the list, is there any way that we can get a more specific information in terms of what the agency will agree to? Accommodate in part doesn't really mean anything. I don't feel it's not specific enough.
Okay, and so Eva, that's a good point, and we can always go back to the agencies after we get the request, but usually what we get is a summary. But if you look at, there's the mayor's office of management budget. If you look on the page where they have the budget, and then they have the community needs listed for each and every community in the city, you will see more detailed responses in that. And I can share links from last year for you for that. And Jim?
Just to say, I think that while we don't necessarily judge or ignore recommendations from committees, we do judge what the priorities are, whether or not they fit as number 1 on the list or number 5 on the list, et cetera, et cetera. Also, I would like to remind the committee that the governor, I believe, has something like, and I forget the exact number, but it was an appreciable number of dollars, billions of dollars, to build affordable housing in the city or in the state. And I believe the majority of that was in the city. And the mayor also has a considerable amount in his budget for affordable housing. And as I say, I don't know that this board district is necessarily as rent burdened as other districts. We could always build more housing. We could always make it much cheaper. But the fact is that this is the east side of Manhattan. A lot of people are going to want to live here, and it's going to be expensive to live here. And that's just a simple fact of life. We have affordable housing, we have public housing, we have supportive housing. How much of that do we need? And go into what Eve was saying.
So Jim, if you'd like to,
definable amounts.
Yeah.
What are the definable amounts?
So Jim, if you would like to make a motion this is our number 1 priority right now. If you'd like to move it down further.
I don't think I'd find support for that. I'm just weighing in for purposes of the record.
Okay.
I think people need to know that, there's another voice here.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comments? I don't see any other hands up. Okay, we will move on to the next item.
ADA compliant subway stations would be one of my first priorities.
Does anyone else have any comments on this, where it is in our priorities? The one change I would have in this blurb for description, that the plans are indefinitely on hold for lack of funds in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, I know the pandemic is technically, coronavirus is here, but I don't think we are in the same type of situation as we were before in lacking of funds. So I'd like to somehow reword that. Brian?
Yeah, we're going to work on that wording. We'll also include the imminence of congestion pricing as a funding mechanism, see if there's something related with that. But yeah, substantively, this is fine at number 2.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to move on to the next item.
Brendan?
Does anybody, was that somebody trying to speak? I didn't catch that. It was breaking out.
Yeah, someone was calling my name, but I have the proper item up.
Okay.
Unless anyone wanted to discuss the ADA compliant subway stations item anymore.
Yeah, no, I think everyone was fine because no one raised their hand, so we're moving on. Does anyone have any issues with the provide more supportive housing and the order in which it appears here? And I mean, I think the one thing that I would change in the description is, the state address from Governor Cuomo, that commitment, that is old and from last year. We need to change that. Actually, not even last year, this is from 2019. And I'm surprised that it is from 2019 because I thought we had added supported housing last year, but if we can update that description. And I can work with you, Jesus and Brendan, to change that. Does anyone else on the committee have any comments on it? Okay, so we can move on to the next item. This again is a request we've had for some time for more senior housing. Does anyone have any changes to this priority? Jim?
Just to give you that figure, the governor's budget was $25 billion towards affordable housing, which would also apply to this item.
Thank you. And we did last year get funding for our senior center in the district, which is something that we've been asking for some time. So that was some movement in this area. Can we move on to the next item, Brenda? This again is an item that many people in the community want, and it's been a request for a while. And as we know that we do not have the continuous esplanade on the east side the way we do on the west side. Does anyone have any comments to this, either the write-up or it being a number 5 on our priority list? Jim, I mean, not Jim, Steve?
A small comment, hasn't the gap between 57th and 59th being worked on right now?
I am not familiar with that, but I can follow up on that. Oh, Brian?
There's a very big disjoint multi-phase plan, and there is some work happening on the upper part. The upper part will be constructed on pilings that have already been there since a FDR rehabilitation project where the FDR was cantilevered over to the river. And then they replaced one by one the blower and the upper deck. So they'll be able to reuse those footings for the first part of that esplanade. However, that most of what is listed here definitely needs to be constructed anew. So, and the current section isn't done yet. So, if anything, I'd still consider this a very high priority for the district and the board, and we can just tidy up the blurb.
Yes, and I just
This
like
is
to-
work that I actually, we went back and forth, me and you, Reshma, went back and forth on this today. We're going to clean up text for transportation items before the end of this month and submit them to the main office. It should not substantively change anything that's going on with any of the priorities from transportation or involving transportation.
Thank you, Brian. And I'd just like to point out that in general, until something is completed, if it's a request on our budget request, we keep it on the list until it's completely done. Steve, you had your hand up again?
It was just to mark that that since changes are being made, I digress. I just wanted to make sure that the wording's there because things are changing right now, and I'd like to keep it high on the priority.
Yes, and we will, in the write-up, perhaps we'll just put in that work has begun, but we want to make sure that it is completed fully.
Thank you.
And if it was just that portion and the work had started, just for, Steve, because this may be your first time, we would put it under student support, but because this is part of a large project, I think it probably should stay under capital, but that's another discussion that Brian and I can have if we want to split it up. Okay, Brendan, if you can move on to the next item. So the public bathroom facilities, and we have gotten some additional facilities in the district, but I think that we could use more, and therefore this remains here as a priority item. If anyone has any comments or changes to this, please speak up. Hannah?
Hi, I actually just have a clarification question. Is that okay to ask
Yes.
now? Just so I am clear, how are these rankings created? What was the process of prioritization?
So the process, this list of budget requests is something that's been around for a while. As I think Jim mentioned, some of these requests have been here for like his 20 years on the community board. So they've been there, and we go through this process each year, and then we rearrange the priorities in terms of if someone thinks that something else, like a good example would be during the pandemic, we changed a lot of the priorities to stuff that was related to the pandemic. Otherwise, it would have things stayed in the same place they were there. If something is completed, if we had an agency fulfill our request, then we take it off our list. And sometimes we have new things added.
Thank you.
Right now, if you think that something, it shouldn't be as much of a priority or needs to be more of a priority, please speak up and let us know.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, just speaking to what Hannah just discussed, I mean, there seems to be some priority given to incumbency, and it may not necessarily reflect the current board view. I think perhaps we might want to poll the entire board to see what their individual rankings are, and then work from that to base it on the number of votes that each number one item gets, each number two item gets, et cetera, et cetera. As I say, the incumbency is the incumbency of each budget item tends to give it higher priority than perhaps it's due. But the principal reason I raised my hand was with respect to the public bathroom facilities. Just to let you know, there is a new law, relatively new law, 2017, but I don't know that any companies are complying with it. If you have a certificate from your doctor saying that you suffer from any number of maladies that require you to immediately have access to a restroom, that that card should require any business that has 2 or more employees on duty at the time to allow you to use their staff restroom, even though it's not a public restroom. And that's been the law since 2017. I see zero to no enforcement or even knowledge of it, which may affect whether or not we wish to keep this as a priority item.
So Jim, thank you for that information. I think this became a bigger issue, at least, I think for someone who's experiencing homelessness, it's a problem and it's always been a problem, but for the general public during the pandemic, when businesses were closed, this became a bigger issue when people were going for walks, being in the parks, and then there were no facilities. And it was brought up as more of a priority than from people in the community. Brian?
Yeah, so for just one quick reminder, we really shouldn't debate any of the policies or topics with these issues. We should save them for their home committees. As a committee chair of transportation, I wouldn't really want this committee to try to come up with new policy on transportation when I have a committee that's already supposed to be handling that, and that's our job to do that. So, it's so far the discussion has been polite, but there is a real danger in continuing down these things. We really need to focus on the sequencing. As far as, the history of how a lot of this stuff has gotten on here and how we've worked with it, it's just, I just wanted to reiterate, I've said this before, this is for benefit of new members mostly. Each agency gets what they get from OMB once we submit this. We submit this in a big package to the city's OMB department. They distribute priorities to the individual agencies, and there are many, many, many agencies in the city. Sometimes our committees individually are submitting to many different city agencies. So for example, something for public bathroom facilities may go to parks, or it might go to DDC or something like that. Something that various agencies that may have domain over this. What we've been told is that what really matters in this sequencing list is the sequence of requests per agency. So if there are 3 requests given to a certain agency, the order in which they are on this list is what matters to that agency. The fact that whether something was number 2 or number 10 or number 20 on the original list with all of the sequencing doesn't matter to them. So they're not going to care that we rank something higher than that if it wasn't going to their agency in the first place. They're not going to look at that. This process is a little old and a little out of date, and it's based on aging computer systems. So that's why it exists that way. It stinks. But that is the thing that we have to keep in mind, that the thing that's going to matter most in terms of how an agency sees the priority on this is where it is in their particular list of priorities and not where it's sat on the whole list. Therefore, we can kind of group this list into kind of 2 or 3 tiers of saying what is the most important to the district overall, what is somewhat important but not the most important, and what we think the district needs but is really the least important of the things. That's at least some of the ways I've tried to do this when I've had to do this ordering in the past, and the way that Pedro used to do it and whatnot. So that's a good way of looking at it, because that's how the agencies are ultimately going to get this information. The one exception to that is that there are many, many parks requests identified through the years that ended up on this list. So that's the agency that's going to get the most number of requests from these capital and expense things. And I can tell you it doesn't matter what order we get them in, because their response all the time is we don't have the money for it, because the mayor's budget, the city council budget just keeps cutting down the share of the city budget that goes to parks, and they don't have enough capital or expense money to deal with a lot of this stuff. So they haven't said no, they're not doing it. They've just said that we need more budget allocations. And some of these requests have been on there again. good 20 years without getting the budget allocations because of the way that the city council budget process is played out.
Brian, thank you for that. And because, we do have a lot of new members joining for the first time. And I just would like to point out that Brian was prior chair of the committee. And this is actually my first time chairing this process. And so it's very helpful to hear what the historical context is from people who've been involved before. And to that extent, Brian, I'll ask you then, do you think it's better for us to take a look at this whole list and see how we want to prioritize rather than go line by line and look at description of each one?
So what I think is, the quickest way to do it is to actually just look at the whole list and say, what are the ones we think we want to move? Does anybody on the committee have an intention coming into this meeting that one of these really needs to move up or down the list? If we're talking about language, we can do that offline because that's just going to be crafted by the office and it doesn't need to be ratified. It's not part of the resolution that we pass along to the full board. So we don't need to actually discuss that in meeting unless we want to do that after we talk about the ordering of the list. But if there's anything we know we want to move, let's address that first. Otherwise, one of the things that I've done and that Rick did was just look at the top 10. And then everything after that is just kind of a general question of whether we'd fix anything else. And just another point to illustrate how this list came about. Usually if we get a new item from a committee that hasn't been on the list the year before, we just figure out a good place to insert it. And that's where it usually starts to live for a while. Sometimes it'll move up because the problem becomes more urgent. Sometimes it'll move down. It'll stay on the list regardless because of what I said earlier with the agency priority thing.
Thank you. One thing I would like to add, though, this last city budget did increase the parks budget by 0.5%. So it's the first time that I've seen it in the time that I've been living in New York City. Jim?
Yeah, just speaking to what Brian spoke of, if city agencies are judging these priorities independently by by which city agency is handling them, perhaps maybe we want to go agency by agency and ensure that each agency item has highest priority, and then from there build out a priority of our own budgets, which apparently doesn't seem to mean much except within the board. Am I understanding you correctly, Brian?
I mean, I think that there's so many agencies to go through and it'll just end up in the same process of us placing stuff on the list, like relatively in 3 tiers, top 10, middle group, and stuff that we want, but is at the end. Part of it is that there is a sense of, and I know we're talking in a public recorded meeting, there is a sense of optics that you can put something that is important to people low on the list and just say, hey, we're putting this forth as a package. We believe this is needed. But if you put something judged frivolous above something that is judged as a moral or a health need, then it could make us look like we don't have our priorities together.
Steve?
I disagree with focusing on agency, priorities by agency. I think it makes sense to go with what the community district profile is and its needs are. For instance, for example, we have one of the densest districts in the city. So some of the things that make sense for a dense district should receive higher priorities regardless of what agency it falls under. Like Brian mentions, it also exhibits that we're trying to communicate that because we have our district profile is a certain way, because we have a certain need, this is where we see priorities. For example, things like a public bathroom, more park space, more quality for housing. Some of the things that kind of resonates with our district. I think that's something we should lean on more towards than focusing on agency by agency.
Thank you, Steve. And so just to let you know that in addition to the Airtable, there's a whole written, community needs statement that is submitted, as well as it's called the district needs statement, as well as we do have a letter that we also write. Once we get the responses back in the past 2 years, what we've done is in that letter highlighted like our 3 top priorities that we want for this area. And so, you know, and that kind of goes in line with what you were saying. Brian?
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I just wanted to reiterate, we really have no cap on what we need to ask for. We just need to be reasonable with the requests. We just want to make sure that a member of the public from our district would read what we've submitted to the city and say, that makes sense. So if we ask for things that we believe that we need, we don't really have a limit to them. For the office's sake, maybe we don't want to submit cruft. And for the public's sake, we don't want to submit things that don't make any sense or are too frivolous. I think the list has gotten to that point. We've trimmed a lot of outdated things off of it as of like 4 or 5 years ago. It had gotten to a point where there was a lot of stuff on the list, but we've trimmed it down significantly. I think the list that has the size it's been the last couple of years has been reasonable.
Yes, and we have 52 items right now. That was something that in the 3 years that I've been involved, we've been cutting away items. And so I'm gonna, we'll go back to the list, and rather than go item by item, I'm gonna, have Brendan scroll through, and then we can prioritize. If anyone has an objection to this, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will do it this way, and anybody can raise your hand and say if they want more information. We will click on it so you get more details on the item, and we can talk about if anyone has any changes to the priorities. So Brendan is scrolling. If anybody, please raise your hand if you have any changes.
Just a clarification, Reshma, just focusing on scrolling through the capital request items, right?
Yes. We'll focus on capital now, and then we'll move on to continuing and expense. And I see Steve's hand up.
Regarding the first item with security, with the Strauss House door repair, I read the description that this has been funded. Fortunately, I haven't attended the housing committee. I don't know if this has been executed or worked on yet, but obviously security for night shift buildings, I believe, should be a higher priority, especially since the more this lingers, the more of an issue this will create, compound the livability for the residents of that community. Unfortunately, I don't know where this is in terms of where it is in that project. Has this being worked on? Has this been completed? If not, I believe it should be higher.
Okay, so as the description says that the new doors are funded, but they wanted added security at Strauss houses, and I am still waiting further feedback from the housing committee on this. They had said they were going to get back to me, but I did not hear back before this meeting. And Brian?
So if we find out later in this process before we submitted that an item has been funded, we move it into continuing, what is it? Continuing service?
Support.
Continued support.
Continuing support. It will be moved into continuing support until the actual project is done. And then that list is unordered, and it's not the priority. I don't think there's priorities in that. Those things, we're just watching them to make sure they're completed. We would have to figure that out. Reshma's in the process of figuring that out. I do believe I also had heard that Carlina's office funded this with discretionary funds in the last period of this past fiscal year. If that's true, the office will then notify Reshma, and it'll simply be removed from the list, and everything will slide up one.
Yeah, I believe this gets completed, a relatively small capital project with a generally a large impact for a significant number of members or residents. I think this is something that can be executed and be done and achievable in a short time period. I guess I'll keep an eye out and see where we are on this.
Okay, and we'll follow up with Carlina's office. Thank you for that, Brian. To just see.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think that that's what I heard, that this was finally funded. This is a project that a lot of people have been trying to get funded for a long time. And it is a relatively low dollar value project, but NYSHA was uncooperative with actually planning it out. There was some other stuff going on with that was like agency organization and whatnot. I won't get into it. I'll leave that to the committee.
Yes, and so I'll follow up with the committee again. Like I said, I've already followed up with them and I'm waiting to hear back, but it will also, if they're not familiar with it, check with Carlina's office. Okay, if you can go back to the list, Brendan. And so, we have, as we had the discussion in the public session with the Ann Hirsch from Dag Hammarskjöld, we have revision happening to this request for repairs to Dag Hammarskjöld, and we're going to have to put that in as a priority, and we have to fit that in somewhere here in the capital. So that's a discussion item. If people don't have any other questions or comments, I want to move over to that. Brian?
I just wanted to highlight the repair 25th Street pedestrian bridge item. I'll be really quick about this. This is a thing that's apparently been funded by the city for a long time and in the design phase, but we're talking like over 10 years since they said it was in design. No work has started on it, nothing's been cleared, and we can't really put it into continuing service or support. We can't put into continuing support without something getting started on it. So this is something that we, the board believes is very important, that they need to move on. And it just is very frustrating to see this sit on the capital list as long as it has, but it is important. And it's one of those things where, we have to strategize as a board what the follow-up's going to be. That's not our concern for tonight, but that's one of the reasons why old items sit on here, is because the city puts them into some state of limbo where we say, oh, it's already got capital allocated to it, we're just not going to work on it.
Didn't we say in the last meeting that we were going to change repair to replace to make it a ADHD compliance? ADA compliant.
It is planned to be replaced.
Yeah, the caption says repair. I thought we had specifically said we were going to change it to replace.
Yeah, Brendan, you can just change that whenever you have a chance in the description.
Yep.
And I would, in the write-up too, that say should be modified to allow ADA accessibility. I think this item request is so old that even terminology that we no longer use is in this, so. If you can move on to the next one, Brendan. So the new senior center, should that be moved to continuing support since we have had initial indications of funding for that?
For which one?
New senior center?
You'll have to ask the chair of that committee.
Okay. And I see, I thought I saw someone's hand up. Steve, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but it wasn't related to the senior center.
You can, we're moved on from that because I'm going to have to check with the committee.
Okay. I'm still, so going on with picking on projects that I think are low capital, immediate effect, capital improvements to Peters Field. The description talks about updating the park with, things like basketball net replacements, making small upgrades here and there, making things compliant, trying to avoid the urban blight, particularly since this is a significant park footprint for that neighborhood. This isn't a major overhaul or shovel, a gigantic capital project, but I think it would have a significant impact to the community. Can be actionable fairly quickly without a tremendous amount of approvals. I think this makes sense to bring it up, since I think this is something the community can act on fairly in a shorter term than a lot of the other capital projects.
Thank you, Steve. Jesus, do you recall, this actually, we discussed this in the parks meeting, and has the blurb been changed yet for that or not? I can't remember.
No, the
No, it
blurb
hasn't.
hasn't changed yet.
Okay.
So I think what the office is going to do is we're going to try and do our best maybe to provide some guidance as to how best to seek this information from the committees, because I think sometimes what happens, and I was in the Parks Committee just like a week ago or so, and this came up, but there's so much that so much information just kind of blows up everywhere, and it's hard for us as the office to sort of, with our little buckets, to kind of pick it up and put it in the right request. That's why, just from a practical point of view, I prefer erring on less is more, fewer requests, because in the past it has been almost overwhelmingly the office that sort of does the follow-up on this stuff, and it's just easier the fewer that there are. That said, this particular one, Steve Simon, the chief of staff at the Manhattan Borough Office of the Parks Department, did say that some work has happened, and he actually disputed the urban blight characterization, but we're gonna have to get with the Parks Committee to see how or if they want to alter this blurb. But we haven't. Essentially, what we've done is on some of them we have added sort of what was said at the meeting, and then we've added the 5 new ones, because the Parks Committee that night added 5 new requests to the list. So those are in there, but the details are not really in there. So we're gonna put that in over the next week or 2.
Yeah, and I think this was a new one, right? The Petersfield.
Petersfield was added last year, so it's new as
That's not it. And I was in that meeting too, and I took notes on the comments too. So I can, but I don't want to overstep Kevin, and so I will speak with them, and maybe we can work on some of these descriptions. But I guess Steve has his hand up again, as well as Jim's. I'll let them speak, but I didn't know if Steve, if you want to request this be moved up higher in the priority, we can take a vote on that if that's something you wanted to do.
I believe that this is like a case of 2 birds in 1 stone. It supports, improves the schools, improves the neighborhood. It's a relatively low capital effort. I think the committee itself will figure out the priorities and what should be on the list, but in terms of something that we can execute and bring to our community right away, I believe this belongs somewhere higher on the list, since this is something that we can act on fairly quickly and help move the rest of the items up the list.
Just on information, that field now is largely covered by AstroTurf. I'd say about 70% of it is AstroTurf. And the remaining 30% is the basketball fields. And I would presume that if they were doing and I frankly didn't pay any attention to the basketball courts themselves, which are in the west side of the park. But I would presume that those were repaired at the same time that they laid the AstroTurf, which happened, I would guess, somewhere in between 2021 and 2022, or 2020 and 2022. So it's a very nice field at this point.
The Parks Department indicated that the basketball courts still need to be resurfaced.
Did they? Okay.
Steve, I see your hand.
Again, I'm just double clicking on the whole, this seems like something that could be relatively done quickly, and the specifics I'll leave to the committee, but I'd like to see it get completed from end to end, so that it's a capital project that we can actually clear off the list.
So Steve, if you want to make a motion to move it up and if you want it to be in the top 10, right now it's 22, or if you have if you want it to be number 1, please make that a motion and then we can take a vote.
I'd like to make a motion to move it up the list.
Anyone?
I don't have a
I'll
ranking.
second it.
Like,
Okay, it's been seconded. We'll take a vote. So, Steve has made a suggestion that we move this higher up. I will say add that perhaps we move it to the top 10 since you do not have an exact priority number that you want it to be at. Brendan, can we take a show of hands for this?
And
Or
can
do
we show the,
roll call vote?
can we show the top 10 of the list currently on the screen?
Yeah, here's the current top 10 of the list. And I see that both Brian and Steve have their hands raised.
Okay, I'll turn it over
But
to Brian and then Steve. Brian?
They might have their hands raised because there is a vote going on by
Oh,
hand.
that's right. Yeah, it was a vote, was to move it. Steve, did you have a comment or you want to?
it's more of a question since this is
Yeah.
kind of a freshman type question. Can we talk about raising the priority of a project by talking about another project that's ahead of it that I believe should not be as high?
In fact, we need to do that because, and that's why I got distracted because I was trying to think of what we needed to move if we're going to move that item in front.
Right. How do you move
I
the
was
stack of
voting
dishes if I can't talk about the other?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you
Right.
have a suggestion, please go ahead and make that.
As much as I would love to see it happen, I believe it should be ahead of the second half subway. At least that project. Because I don't think the nudge will push that any further. Plus, it kind of counterproductive of the density that we're challenged with here that we haven't resolved before a major transportation arm comes like that into the neighborhood. So I think it should be at least above the second half subway phase 3 effort. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve, for that. And also with the Second Avenue subway, I mean, even the phase 2 portion of that, it is coming from federal funds mostly, not city funds or state funds for that matter. And the other thing I might suggest is, as much as I would want a new park in our community district, that is a pie in the sky type of thing to get funded. Whereas, as you mentioned, the Peters Field is a little bit easier to get done and we should push for that. And so I would suggest that we move it even in front of that as well.
Agreed. Since the new park, we haven't found a location, description, like a whole slew of things where Peters exists right now. People are heavily using it and needs the board support to keep cultivating, keep growing it so that the community stays happy and continues to support the neighborhood.
Brian?
Yeah, I agree with that. I was going to suggest that we can put in as a new number 9. We can just do it stack of dishes style and insert something. And, because of what I was saying earlier with the way the agencies view things, it's immaterial in the long run if we just insert one in the middle and move it up the list. We don't have to do a whole scale reordering. I was also going to say that our reordering, we can just have a freewheeling discussion about that. We don't need to have votes until we get the full list done. Then we vote on that.
Okay.
So there doesn't need to be motions to move things. People can just come up with it, raise their hand, and we can efficiently dispatch.
Okay, so thank you.
I'd put this one in closer to bus parking, atop bus parking, because part of the reason that we have a park in the community district is to try to accommodate the loss of parkland that we had from the water, from the closing of Stuyvesant Cove and what have you, as well as the fact that we have one of the lowest ratios of parkland in all of the city community boards. I believe at one point we were the lowest, and I think that we are probably worth keeping that as one of our top 10, particularly if, as Brian says, they go to the Parks Department and the Parks Department views them as a priority. I would put it probably in place of the bus parking, which is number 11.
Okay, I'm good with that. So Brendan, if you can, and we don't, as Brian pointed out, we don't need to actually change the numbering right now. So if we can insert Petersfield right below, replace windows and HVAC and Ashley Levy.
So right
That's it.
below
Right.
Yeah.
that item.
Right.
Yeah.
The Astor Levy is also a lower cost, lower capital budget.
Yeah, it
item.
is. And some of that has been funded, and we'll need to
Yeah.
just follow up with the Parks
Yeah.
Committee meeting last week. So that may actually, some of that may change.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's fine to put it there, because Petersfield could end up in top 10 because of the other changes.
Actually, if there are going to be a lot of moving around, it might actually be better for us to do this now. Brendan, I have the editable version, and it should push to your read-only version. So Petersfield, so if you guys will indulge me, we'll just go ahead and add this in now. Petersfield, which is 22, I believe. This committee proposes it to be
number 11, I think it was.
11. Okay.
I believe so.
Yes. Because
All right, we'll move it to 11.
Wait, how do we end up with something's wrong here? New Park and
numbers
Community
changed.
District 6 is on 12.
because that was number
something's-
9. The new park was
Yeah.
number 9, I thought.
Yeah, something's screwy here.
So right now, okay, so right now you guys have 2 rankings. One of them is the rank for fiscal year 2023. That is the rank you voted for last October,
Mhm.
October of 2021. Fiscal year 2023 is what is in effect right now as we speak. The ranking for fiscal year 2024, the one that you will be voting on in October of 2022, next month, that is a different rank that you can see on your screen for you. We are going to be making the changes to the fiscal year 2024 rank. The fiscal year 2023 rank, since that can't be changed, will remain untouched. And then once the board votes on its final fiscal year 2024 rankings, the fiscal year 2023 rank column will go away. It will be hidden. So it's a little confusing right now, but so that we don't lose what it was before and what you're proposing it to be now, we keep them both.
Can you show the top 10 for the fiscal 2024 right now? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that right now they match up. I think the issue was it's the cell number was 14 is different. That's why.
The numbers on the very far left, yes, those are the line numbers. Those are just for those have nothing to do with your rankings.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. All right. Oh, okay.
And right now it's structured at the fiscal year 2023 rank. Those are all in numerical order. If we change, I've added, for example, 11 to Petersfield, it hasn't actually changed anything because right now the dominant field is the fiscal year 2023 one, not the 2024.
Right. I need to learn to read right to left.
Okay, so the screen has gone green.
Yeah, I'm just refreshing it, that's all.
Okay.
Just to make sure that it reflects the fact that, at least as of right now, the committee wants to rank this item on Peters Field to number 11 for fiscal
Right.
year 2024.
Yes. And then the new item that we have on top, which is for Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, I think that that's something that has already gotten partial funding from Pete Power's office, and therefore I would like that to be in our top 10 priorities as well, because I think that it is something that can hopefully get funded.
My understanding was, so the way this came about in the Parks Committee, unless there were other discussions that I was not privy to, this board has had on the budget request for many years a capital request to repair the fountains at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. And because of bidding problems, it has been sort of trying to get out for bid for many years. At the Parks Committee meeting last week, Steve Simon indicated that the fountain portion and a few other things were budgeted, and that it was his hope that they would be put out for bid by the end of the year. He did, however, reveal that there are other things, other capital projects in that park that need funding and currently do not have it. And he rattled off things.
Electrical work, yeah.
Yeah, he rattled off a few things. So that, now we need the details about that. And if Ms. Hirsch, who has, I believe, been corresponding with you and with Kevin, if she can provide some of those details, if Steve can provide some of those details, that's great. But this thing, this new capital improvements at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, that is that request.
Yes, but we still have to give it a priority number. Yes. And I think from the emails that we got today, I think we have enough to write it up, and Kevin and I will work on that and follow up with Ann if we, or Steve, if we need more information.
Okay, so what priority, what ranking do you guys propose?
Yes, and so I'm proposing that it be in the top 10, and again, because it has gotten some funding already and needs additional funding for completion. And
the requests are different now. The fountains are a separate request, and this is, as far as the Parks Department is concerned, a brand new request. And as far as OMB is concerned, a brand new request that is in need of funding.
Okay, I see your point. So it's not that there's additional funding required because it is a new request. Okay, I'll let Steve speak before we make that decision. Steve?
Sorry, it wasn't related to Dag Hammarskjöld.
Okay. So for the Dag Hammarskjöld, if you can scroll down, where do we have the fountains were where in the ranking?
The fountains are in continued support.
Okay, because it had been something that last year we had as a project that was ongoing.
Well, no, it's just that they had been put up for bid, and then they just never, the bids weren't successful, and then it was put out again, and it kept being in this limbo, but we assumed it was moving along. So that's why it's been in continued support. Now, Steve Simon said that he is more confident now that it can be continued support now, and that by the end of the year, it should be put out for bid. So perhaps we'll take his word for it and leave it there. But then he said, but there's this other stuff that needs funding, and that's why there's this new request.
Yes. So I would, if you can scroll down to what number 5 is right now in 2024. Right, so the Esplanade, I would recommend that we put this at number 6 and shift everything down unless people have objections to that.
So you're saying for the new Dag Hammarskjöld request that should be number 6?
Yes.
Okay. It's not going to shift everything down. Right now, we're going to have 2 6s and 2 11s. We'll sort that all out later. But okay, so that's ranked as number 6.
And then I'll let Steve speak. You had a comment?
Yes, sorry. I'm also looking at the Airtable, but it's not updating to what's on the screen. But the other point that I mentioned, I couldn't see it while you're scrolling up and down, the security door to the Strauss House.
Yes.
I'd like to raise that in priority in line with low capital, greatest impact, and also is actually fully funded, as previously mentioned by Council Member Carlina Rivera. So we have advocates who want to make this done. I don't believe it's in the top 10. I believe that should be in the top 10 since it would have an immediate effect, improvement to the quality of life in that neighborhood.
So it's number 7 right now?
It is?
Yeah, I as far as I see right there, yes, number 7.
Like same thing here. I learned read to right to left.
Yeah, no, it is confusing because you have
Yeah.
the cell column versus what the priority column is.
It's
I digress.
Talmudic. You have to read right to left.
But once I just because I just put in for number 6 the Dag Hammarskjöld request, that will shift it down by 1. And if you would I see your your belief that this is something to be easily funded, and we can move it before that if that's what you would like. And I mean, I'm hoping that that is something that's actually already being funded from Carlina's office. And
I would think so.
yeah, and it can be taken off the list, but we don't have any confirmation of that yet.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not looking to fight the minutia of fighting one place over the other, as long as it's in the top 10.
Okay, and it is in the top 10, so we can go back to if there's nobody else who has any items that are on the list already that they want to move, we need to put in the new items that are there,
Okay.
because there's 4 other items in addition to the Dag Hammarskjöld request.
Also, just to very quickly add, since I know there's been some confusion with the proposed fiscal year 2024 rank in relation to where certain items are on this list, I've been able to have things sorted so that way it's clearer. So
Yeah.
to Jesus's point, you can see that there are currently 2 11s.
Yes, yeah.
And there will be 2 6s, since it sounds like this item on dog will be
Yeah.
moved up to number 6.
Yes, and then in the final reordering, we will fix that, and then we'll have before we present this to the full board.
Do we have one more meeting before it goes to full board?
Yes, we have an October meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it goes to full board, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so this is really, we want to iron out everything now, like these questions that come up with what we need to go back to different committees for. We can sort that out. I will talk to the different committee heads between now and the October meeting, and then hopefully the October meeting, we will finalize everything here. Okay, so Brendan, if you can go back up so we can find a placements for the other 4 items. So
Also going to hit refresh,
Mhm.
so that way, hopefully, there we go. Okay, that's odd.
Brendan, when you refreshed, it undid your group, your sorting.
Oh, okay. Guess I'll need to. There we go. That's more like it.
Does anyone have any strong feelings on the ordering of any of these other items?
Looks like most of them are coming out of parks, no?
Yes, yeah, it's all parks. So these are all, we had 5
So
new
why
items.
don't we
coming from
why
parks.
don't we let the parks department or parks order them themselves as to what they would prefer, and then we can slop them all in that order, whatever that may be, not line for line. In other words, if they give us 1 through 4, we can make them 15, 18, 20, 22, whatever we decide to make. But I don't even know what their priorities are.
Yes, and so,
The committee's
I-
priorities.
yeah, so I will go back to them and with that, and I'll speak to Kevin, and we can prioritize that and add them in.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
should
and
give you, they should, all the committees should give you that when they give you their priorities. Especially the new ones.
So that's my oversight for not having asked that, but I am actually on the Parks Committee myself, but I don't want to, make decisions for the whole committee. So, but I can go back and talk to them.
Do we still have a quorum? I noticed we've lost a
No,
couple of people.
we do have a quorum. Brian had to leave. I know, the meeting, let me check the time. Well, it's not 8 o'clock yet, but Brian did have to leave. But I mean, I think unless anyone has any more changes on the capital, I think that if people are okay with your suggestion, Jim, then we're done with the capital request and we can move on to continue and support and expense. Take a look at that and we'll be, it shouldn't take that long. Steve?
On the capital lists, there is a rank 17, install walkway counters at various locations, CD6. I thought this was completed, particularly sensitive since we are near healthcare, greater density of healthcare facilities and reasonable distance from major transportations like the subway, walking to and fro for any residents that is taking the subway to and the hospitals on First Ave. This would be something that they would need to help guide them through the neighborhood. But last I recall, a great deal of effort was being made to install a lot of these at key intersections that particularly is parallel with major subway stations towards the east side. I don't know where this is in a project.
Is this come from transportation?
This
Brendan?
is transportation.
Yeah, transportation. So I will have to talk to Brian about this and see what the status is. I'm not familiar with it at all.
Last I picked on this was that a great deal of effort was being put where this was being installed. And I think it's important, but if it's near completion, I'd like to see it completed. Because I think this is important since this fits the profile of our neighborhood and we should support features like this that helps improve the pedestrians and cyclists.
No, I mean, I agree that it's useful information to have and to be able to have these counters. In my reading of last year's budget and stuff, I just haven't seen any mention of this or read anything in the news about what's happening with this. So that's why I need to follow up. All right, so I think seeing no other hands, we can move on to a continuing support.
I'll scroll down to all the continued support items.
Thank you. And so these items, pretty much most of them are still in continued support. The question would be for the repairs for the fountains and Dag Hammarskjöld. I mean, that's out to bids, so I would keep that on, even though it has been fully funded. And similarly with Bellevue South, that work has begun already, but it has not been completed yet. Anyone have any questions on this or any comments? Okay, so we can move on to the expense Oh, wait, Eva Marie?
I just wanted to know, could you put in a descriptive blurb for build pedestrian bridge to fix the pinch point? Is that a safety factor? If I could just see the blurb on that. Excuse me. That's what I thought. It's saying we hear from constituents that have been hit by bikes at this pitch point. Is this something that should be still under continued support based on the fact that it is very much a safety factor? Even if at this particular point it's put towards the bottom of the capitals list, is there something that would be where it could get off of continued support to make it more definite in terms of what we're asking for?
So, I mean, are you suggesting we move it? Because I think it's in continued support because it has been fully funded. In the matter
Oh, I
of,
see.
yeah.
Would you be able to send me any link that shows if it's fully funded, what the progress is, that it is a safety issue? Is there any additional information on it besides that it says fully funded, but it doesn't say completed, or we're just saying we advocate for there to be swift progress in creating a safe space for pedestrians and cyclists? Is an urgent concern here. I just wanted to know if we're sort of letting it hang because it has support, but it doesn't indicate that it's been completed or how much completed.
So I will talk to the Transportation Committee Chair on this to get more information on it. But I see Lawrence Shire, who is a board member, has raised his hand. He's not on this committee, but I will give him the floor. I don't know if he has, because perhaps he has a comment on this.
Yeah, I'll know on the record though that Larry is a member of the Transportation Committee as well.
Yes. Yeah, and I had assumed that, so that's why I wanted to just give him an opportunity to speak. And I apologize, Larry, I saw that you had your hand up earlier and I didn't get a chance to get to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm on the Transportation Committee, and this is a matter that is being taken up at the Land Use and Waterfront Committee meeting because this relates to the ESCR project. The pinch point is something that's been an ongoing problem as a matter of safety, and it was proposed back when Borough President Stringer had his Blue Way proposal to build something similar to what is now being funded. The timing and the sequencing of this is that the ESCR project will put in foundations for the bridge, but no columns, no bridge. That will happen at a later date when that project has been completed. That's my understanding of the sequencing. So my thought is that continuing support for this would be appropriate as it's been described. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, Eva, do you have any other questions for Larry?
I had a.
It's about it's ongoing. Is that what you're saying? That's something.
Yeah, it's on its way, but it's delayed.
Is there an indication as to how long the delay will be? It's just that the way this is written, it sounds very serious in that area, particularly near Con Edison. So
it is. It's an insoluble problem until you have created a wider passageway. And the only way to do that, because of the screen cleaning building, there's a set of screens that go down to filter the water that goes into the Con Ed plant to cool its operations. The screens keep the fish out, and so those have to be lifted up from time to time to be scraped off. That brick building is hard on the roadway of the FDR Drive. It's only about 3 feet wide there. And when the DOT built a fence separating pedestrians from the cars, a very narrow fence, but still better than when I originally moved here. And I jogged down to the Williamsburg Bridge from Stuyvesant Town every day back in the early 80s. And then the situation was that the pathway was a little bit narrower, but there was nothing between you and the cars. So yeah, there's the risk of being hit by an automobile, which I think is far more serious than a collision between bicyclists and pedestrians. 2 bikes can't pass each other either on this long stretch of narrow pathway. So it's critically important for this proposed bridge to be built. And we understand the sequencing is that it's a higher priority for the city to prevent the floods, and they're building that first. And this will be accommodated, but will be built at a later date. Does that answer what you're asking about?
Yes, it does. It does sound like it's dormant, but has money. So, but I understand what you're saying in terms of securing that area because of the flooding before this can be fixed. So I understand.
Well, you raise a very good point there, and that you say that it's dormant, but it has money. I think that what is very important and maybe should be mentioned here is that the engineering work for the bridge should proceed right now so that construction could begin the moment that the ESCR winds down, and we don't lose a few years in the interim. I raised the same point in the question and answer regarding the Second Avenue subway project, and I don't think that this should be of a lower priority for the reason that we lost this opportunity to plan the second phase while the first phase was being constructed. And everybody who had been working on the project had been sent home, all the equipment had been sent away, and now we're starting from scratch again. So obviously the thing that is being recommended there is that while we're in the second phase construction, the planning for the third and the fourth stage be undertaken, and not using necessarily the same funding. And that's why this is a capital project. That's all.
All right, thank you. And thank you for those comments in the Q&A as well. And I think that, Brian will be discussing this in your next committee meeting as well to get input, but I've made note of these comments to change the write-up.
Thank you very much, Lawrence and Reshma. Thank you very much for the explanations.
Thank you. And
You're
then
welcome.
Jim had his hand up, but I see he's not there now. So we can maybe move on to expense, Brendan, and then if Jim, when he comes back, if he has a comment.
I see Jim here.
Oh, you do? I mean, I see his hand up, but I don't see him on the screen.
Well, he's not speaking right now, but
Yeah.
I do see his hand up.
Yeah.
So Jim, if you're able to unmute yourself.
Perhaps he stepped away from his camera.
Yeah, I think he stepped away because I just see a blank screen. I don't see him in the screen. So I think he may have stepped away.
Well, I'll keep his hand up
Yeah.
for now, and if we see him later, we can
Yeah.
ask. Just give me a moment.
Oh, Jim cannot hear or see us is what Steve is saying.
No,
Maybe
I'm
his-
just sending it through chat, just in case his audio is not working.
Oh, okay, I see. Yes, maybe his thing is frozen. In fact, my own computer is about to die, so I need to charge it. So I'm glad you said that. Steve. Give me guys 1 second. And so this is the expense budget. And for those who are new to the committee, the expense budget is not capital projects, but services that we want funded, as you can see from the short names in these. And if anybody has any questions about that, we can look at the more detailed descriptions. If anybody has any changes, please raise your hand. Steve?
A lot of this, I'll pick on one of them, the stabilization beds.
Yes.
I know a couple of them have cropped up over the year. I don't know how many more we've gained. Obviously we'll never fulfill the need that's out there, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, is there a way we track the number of units that support stabilization beds? Because a lot of that information is kind of blurred between what's public and publicly supported, privately run. It's quite difficult to track a lot of that stuff. I guess we're requesting for more information on this.
Okay, so I will go back to the committee and ask to see that if they have that data on, there were some stabilization beds added last year. We were asking for more, and I'll find out how many were added. I don't know that number off the top of my head.
Right, and it's more of an observation if we obviously have been getting more stabilization beds. We want to make sure that the community meets that need, that our rate isn't dropping, increasing, decreasing. We want to see where that is.
Yes.
Just an observation, yeah.
And when it's in the expense, it means that we want it to continue. So even it has been funded, we want to make sure that they continue giving us funds for that.
Understood.
I think you can close this, Brendan. Does anyone have any other questions or comments? I still don't see Jim.
And if anyone needs me to go up again, like if I scroll too quickly, please let me know.
And if we don't have any more comments, I mean, we can have a motion to adjourn, and I can speak to Jim separately because perhaps he's had some technical issues and I'm not able to get him to make his comment now. Karen? Oh, you're muted, Karen.
Sorry, motion to adjourn?
Anyone want to second the motion?
So we're not waiting for Jim to return?
No, I'm going to reach out to him separately. I've actually just sent him an email. I don't have his number, but he's been gone for a while, so I feel that perhaps he's had some technical issue.
I see a shadow. Is that you, Jim?
Sorry, I had to take a break to do our composting, which we do once a week. So that's my absence. What was there a question put to me?
There was an item where you had your hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant, yeah, that was to ask permission to leave, but I needed to get it done because it goes out. Apologies.
No, and my apologies because my computer just died on me, so I had to re-log in. The battery had died. But I'm glad you're back, Jim, and you had your hand up before I had got.
As I say, it was simply to tell the committee that I was going to take a few minutes break to go do my family's composting.
Well,
which will be a priority in the expense budget when we get to it.
Yes, we're in the expense. We're in the expense budget, and I'm glad to hear that you're composting. But I don't think we have composting in our expense budgets. If that's something you want to add,
we should. Yes, absolutely. Twice a week at least.
Yeah.
15% of the greenhouse gas comes from garbage that's sitting
quite
in
honestly,
landfills.
where does that fall under?
Yeah, exactly.
Which committee?
Say again?
Which committee does that fall under? Composting, if
Probably environment.
Even if it's outside of parks, like physical park, it's like towards like if apartments and businesses want to pursue it, like what a more expansive approach to it. Because I agree with your statement, Jim. And I think the community could take advantage of composting, but I mean, is it a parks thing?
I think so, because the Parks Committee is actually, we last year changed the name of the Parks Committee to be Environment and Parks. We still just say parks because historically, it has been parks related, but I will, when I have my conversation with the Parks Committee chair, which I'm supposed to do tomorrow, I will bring this up, and then there'll be another parks meeting before our next budget meeting, and we'll bring that up in the meeting.
Tangential to that, does that also include sanitation?
Just to interject here, it would almost certainly be sanitation, because whenever the CB6 office has been informed of any cuts to their composting program, and then subsequently when they announced that those cuts were no more, and when they announced that composting was coming to our district, all of that came from the Department of Sanitation. It's sanitation related.
Okay.
To clarify, does sanitation fall under parks and environment to parks?
It depends on the sanitation issue, but this particular one, since composting is an environmental issue, I think one could very easily argue that it's Environment and Parks Committee.
Maybe sanitation needs to be under environment, but that's for the executive committee to decide, not me.
But I can bring it up. I mean, again, I'll bring it up in the Environment and Parks Committee.
As I understood, it was almost under threat of being removed, so it'd be nice that it doesn't fall out of any of our committees.
Yeah, and it was again stopped, as you all know, during the pandemic, right? All the compost collection. So.
There's also a shortage of composting containers, I understand, north of St. Barton Park, excuse me.
All right, so is Jim or anyone else, did you have any other comments other than that? We had a motion to adjourn the meeting before.
Yes, I'm sorry. Sorry to take so much time. On did we do expense budget?
Yes, we did, but that's when you weren't there, so we don't need to adjourn. I would like to get comments. Yeah.
Under new business, two items that I think we as a budget committee should address are the issue with respect to the fair zoning below East 60th Street. There's Reshma, this is the letter that I sent you, my wife and my comments. It amounts, in my view, since there's no way to escape this other than to ride public transit or to walk, to me, it smacks of a consumption tax that's probably been imposed illegally, insofar as it's not equally imposed equally against all citizens of the city or the state. And moreover, it's also, in my view, a taking of real property, constructive taking, in violation of the Fifth Amendment. When you put a burden on people's property rights, the Supreme Court has held that the taking of that property requires compensation, even if it's an encumbrance on the property. They don't necessarily have to take it outright as they would with, say, a condemnation under building something for the city. And that's the first issue. And the second issue that I think we should address under new business is the fact that the city has increased the fare on the ferry boats to $4 each way, instead of leaving it approximately, I think it was equal to the subway fare.
Yeah, it was the same. It was same as the subway fare.
Right. And when I looked at the basis for that increase was an audit that the city controller prepared. When I looked through the audit, it appeared to me that he was neglecting a federal rule for accounting that is generally accepted within the industry, and applied instead a general concept that's underlining most generally accepted accounting principles, which is, that the expenses fairly present the costs. But since this is a specialized industry, I believe that what the controller has called buried expenses is incorrect. The audit was prepared for under the auspices of the Economic Development Corporation, and the Economic Development Corporation has rejected it outright. They've agreed to make an additional disclosures, footnote disclosures in the ferry financial statements, but are sticking with the GAAP industry standard. So I think we should address this, because I know a lot of the people in our community district use that ferry to commute to jobs downtown, in Brooklyn, uptown. I use it all the time when I go to see my son in Brooklyn. So I prefer it much to taking the F over to the L, and
No, Jim, I mean, thank you for bringing that up, and both those issues we can have as agenda items. If we can do it in November as opposed to October, because October will still be doing budget. But I also use the theory quite often, and had looked at that report, and I saw your letter as well, and it's something that we put on the agenda for November.
Right. The thing with the toll road, the
Congestion.
$9 or $29 congestion pricing, is that the period for public comment on that ends, I believe, on the 24th of this month. They did what they usually do, which is try to do it when community boards are out of business, or on hiatus.
Yeah, because most don't meet in August, so it's due pretty soon.
Exactly. But then they've extended it an additional 2 weeks. I think our resolution, since we're not going to be able to address it for some time, should be that it be reopened entirely, and that community boards within the affected area be allowed to weigh in. It's going to cost everybody that lives in this district additional, everybody within this district, I would probably guess several hundred, if not more, several $1,000s. If you're doing something like a let's say, for example, a couple of years ago, we had our kitchen remodeled. All right. Every time those guys came in, it would have been a charge of $24 per day additional. And it took them a lot longer than it should have, but you know, let's assume it's they do it over 2-3 months. It's $2,400 for them to come in if they do it, say, over 100 days. So it's something that affects our community board. We should weigh in on it. I know transportation has issued a comment on it and had a resolution on it a couple of years ago, and I spoke with Brian about it earlier, or we exchanged emails. But what he was addressing was the environmental aspects and traffic and all the rest of it. And we never really discussed in this board the cost aspects or the takings issue, which I think are very important, you know, especially not only for residents, but also for commercial businesses. If you've got a piece of real estate in this city, your value of your property has declined considerably, because every time you go to take inventory or bring in workers from outside the district, you're going to have to compensate them somehow. My building, our co-op, you know, most of our building staff live in transit deserts, and you know, you're asking these guys to come to work at 6-7 o'clock in the morning, and they're also here for building emergencies. So, you know, it's going to cost them $24 because they can't really wait for the subway.
No,
And most of them don't even have access to a subway.
No,
frankly.
Jim, that's, I mean, again, I saw your letter, and those are points I had not thought of, many of those things that you brought up. So thank you. And I'm going to take a look at when we need to make comments. If we can fit it in the October meeting, we will try to do that. And in fact, I had to bring up, you know, I saw today that I heard that the governor has not extended emergency orders. So our next meeting will have to be an in-person meeting, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Brendan, if you've had any other guidance on that. I know this news just came out this afternoon.
This is news to me. I know that the deadline was coming up.
Yes, yeah, it was September 15th, and then they were gonna maybe renew it again from that time, but it looks like it will not be renewed. And the reason why I bring that up is, you know, our meeting is scheduled for October 11th right now, which I had assumed would be a Zoom meeting. And if it's an in-person meeting, I'm gonna have to reschedule it because that day is my father's 75th birthday. So I'm gonna be in Massachusetts, and I was gonna just log in through Zoom. I didn't think it'd be an issue. But it will be an issue if I need to be here in person. So I apologize for that. But I just wanted to give everyone advance notice. If that has to be an in-person meeting, we may have to move it to the week before, because the full board is the next day, and we need to get these budget items approved and by the full board.
75 is a big one. You have to be there. I could make a partisan comment, but I'll reserve it.
And so then, you know, I know, thank you all for staying on. I know we've exceeded the amount of time for the meeting, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. And we had a motion to adjourn earlier. If someone can just make it again so we can have it formally done.
So moved, since I delayed it.
Okay, so that's the second on that. So, you know, we are adjourning the meeting at 8:27 p.m. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.